Shoreline Mafia is a hip-hop collective hailing from Los Angeles, California that emerged in the late 2010s as a potent force within the genre, blending elements of West Coast rap with Southern trap influences. Composed of members like OHGEESY, Fenix, Flexin, Rob Vicious, and Master Kato, the group quickly gained recognition for their distinctive sound, vibrant energy, and being the poster boys for sipping lean. But somewhere along the way, things turned sour, and what was once one of the most promising rap groups in the game split up and left their fans and the entire hip-hop world in shock. From their banger songs, to the secrets that tore them apart, and a possible reunion on the way, today, sit back as we look back into the wild story behind Shoreline Mafia. Shoreline Mafia was founded in 2014, rooted in the heart of Los Angeles. The group's name reflects their connection to the Shoreline Village, a neighborhood that symbolizes the blend of urban culture and coastal lifestyle. The group took influence from their surroundings. Growing up in LA, they always had that energetic, bouncy soul and mixed it with artists that they were listening to growing up, like 3 6 Mafia and Future. The group is composed of the 4 main members, OHGEESY, Fenix Flexin, Rob Vicious, and Master Kato. Other prominent figures surrounding the group were Ron, a very frequent producer for them, and Mac Dawg, who was another rapper very close with the group. You also frequently hear members, most notably OHGEESY, also talking about another group, OTX.
And I'm OTX, bitch, I'm on the pole now. Serving goofy niggas, counting at the dough now. And I'm OTX, bitch, I'm on the pole now. Serving goofy.
Or Off the X. This is the name of the larger Shoreline group or posse. Basically, OTX is the family, and Shoreline Mafia are just the musicians within the family, if that makes sense. OHGEESY and Fenix Flexin would meet each other sometime in high school as some local taggers, or spray paint artists, when they would eventually start experimenting making music together. Into things, Fenix brought in another high school friend, Rob Vicious, who at the time was making beats, and OHGEESY would bring in Master Kato, who he had met after attending a Rock the Bell show. The group's first single was titled In the Field, released in August 2014, and can show a young Shoreline Mafia surrounded by teens doing all types of drugs and rowdy kid stuff. They followed up with several other songs, with some of them doing real numbers like Vice City, Off the Shits, and Callin'. The group would continue gaining a larger and larger buzz over the years, when finally they would drop their first certified hit, Musty. It was doing real numbers at the time. Even though the original video was taken down, Complex reported it had 15 million views by the time they had re-recorded it. This would be the song to put them on the map, being their first single to make it on the Billboard charts and giving them a certified RIAA plaque. Besides the group dropping banger songs and music videos, they were also known for being the face of the then super prominent drug in rap, lean, which, for those who don't know somehow, is cough syrup with codeine in it, mixed with soda, which is an opiate, therefore making it literally addicting. Just something to keep in mind in our heads as we understand these individuals. And what better place to start off than with the infamous Fox News segment on the group.
This music video from Southland rap group Shoreline Mafia shows them partying in a kitchen with something you're more likely to find in your medicine cabinet. Rappers pouring prescription-grade cough syrup into soda and sipping, even holding up a bottle with a gun in hand. Referred to as its street name, Purple Drank, Dirty Sprite, Scissor, or Lean, this medicinal mixture blowing up in videos posted online isn't curing a cough. Instead, young people are using it to get high. Locally based rap group Shoreline Mafia is known to take their love of lean to another level. Take a look at this music video, made to look like a home invasion robbery with masked suspects, guns pointed at victims, spliced together with shots of lean.
Shoreline Mafia is on the news.
After Fox 11 first aired this story promo, members of Shoreline Mafia posted to their Instagram account this response: Expletive Fox, we sip and juice for life.
In September 2017, Fox 11 decided to do a news segment on the effects of the rising drug codeine, and who else did they decide to show off other than our boys, Shoreline Mafia? They even did a promo for the segment on social media, which enticed Shoreline Mafia to reply to them publicly saying this. It was shortly after this, they would do their first official interview on No Jumper with Adam22. During this, Adam asked how they got so into lean. They say they got into lean when script busting became a habit, which for those that don't know, is just the process of getting lean from a crooked doctor. They were so comfortable with the drug, in fact, they even joked about the infamous Justin Bieber overdose from one of the largest brands making the drug at the time, Activist.
Y'all ever had Act?
Hell yeah, we just had some Act the other day.
Really?
Last
Yeah,
week.
we just had some last
Where does that
week.
shit come from?
Random places, you gotta find it. Your grandma's medicine
gold,
cabinet.
man.
Your great grandma might have some.
Oh, God.
Check her cabinets and DM me if you find it.
Oh, God, I got you.
I got you.
Shout out Frankie Danks, though.
Shout out, Frank.
Shout out nigga Frankie Danks. See the juice, man.
He keep us posed.
So you guys don't remember, but legend, well, you might remember, but legend has it that like Justin Bieber like overdosed on Act, and that's why it got taken away. Are you guys are gonna do the same thing?
He
Nah, but I
fucked
feel-
it up for us. Oh, God.
Go on to explain how they sold fake lean at times by mixing K-Ro and Z-Quil, but sometimes adding a Xan into it, even going as far as spending almost $2,000 on alcohol for a video shoot, just to pour it all out, with no one taking a sip, just to refill the bottles with lean.
He fucked everything up, bro. Oh,
It's because
I hope you hear this.
he
shit.
way too mainstream to
He
be
fucked
doing
it
shit
up,
like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
And his audience is like Disney Channel kids.
whole
So
different
for
type
him
of
to be coming out
What?
sipping lean is too. It's all bad.
Certain people just shouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah.
You got to pretend
Someone
it's
should have
wine.
took that shit out his hand.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's good. You guys ever get served some fake lean?
Nah.
Never buy a fake lead. Come on now.
You ever serve somebody some fake lean?
Yeah.
Okay, finesse. Let's hear about it. How you do this? How you pull it off? You screw a hole in the bottom? I seen somebody do that one
Robbie the
time.
doctor right
You know
here.
what I'm saying? You got to jig them for them pipes because they ain't going to know who sealed them, you feel me?
Okay.
I hit him with the K-Roll and
gotta
mix
hit
it
'em
with the
You
Z-Quil.
feel me? Every once in a while, if I feel good, you know what I'm saying, I might throw a little Xanax in that motherfucker.
Oh, wait a minute.
about
Wait. So how's this work? You take the fucking fake
look.
lean and throw a Xan in?
Man, bro, it's so many ways to get money, man.
Okay, put me on, man. I gotta make some money. What's up?
All right, so look, check this out. I ain't gonna give you the recipe.
I need the whole thing, bro.
No, man. Because I got that straight drop, dude.
I'm gonna call you. We gotta get your number in
My
my
doctor hooked me up. Like, nah, that's that Raw Vicious special, boy.
The Raw Vicious remix.
That's that re-rock. Hey, shout out to everybody that bought that fake lean for me, though. I love you. You pay my bills. Oh, God.
It really just goes to show how comfortable they were with the drug, and something that kept a lot of people interested in their music. They would follow up all this buzz with the release of their first mixtape, Shoreline Do That Shit, which was an absolute success for the group. But before 2017 ended, there's one notable thing that happened in the background that we have to mention, as it's a stepping stone for what would ultimately break up the group. December 28, 2017, OHGEEZY would, on his own, file as the sole owner for the Shoreline trademark. Now, at the time, we have no reason to believe this was in bad faith, and honestly, OHGEEZY will still probably defend that it never was. But it would be the first thing that would put a slice of tension within the group. But that aside for right now, things were still going great for the guys. In January 2018, they would officially sign their first deal to Atlantic Records, which, knowing OHGEEZY and Fenix, makes a lot of sense why they chose them. Now, after just this, in February of that same year, less than 2 full months after filing the first one and being signed to Atlantic, OHGEEZY then files for the Shoreline LLC, meaning he is now officially the sole owner of the name, brand, and likeness of Shoreline Mafia. Any Shoreline Mafia merch or any promo that wasn't being done by Atlantic now had to go through him. And it's unclear when this information had become public knowledge for the rest of the guys. But regardless of that right now, they kept going about their business. Atlantic put together a tour for the group, which they dubbed the OTX Tour, and to kick things off, they decided to reshoot the music video for Musty. This will be the same tour that gets infamously mentioned later on during the breakup, so make sure to stay tuned. Here's where things get really sticky, you see, because when choosing a director for the music video, Atlantic somehow chose James Larese, who just coincidentally happens to be the grandfather to OHGEEZY's son, aka the father of his baby mama. And in an interview with James Larese on No Jumper, we get to see a clearer picture into what was happening in OHGEEZY's life around that time Shoreline was blowing up. And I mean, just listen to some of this.
For instance, my my family is OHGEEZY from Shoreline Mafia, and he
OHGEEZY, Shoreline Mafia.
it's he's the he's the father of my grandson. Basically, he's with my daughter, and he is part of this crew Shoreline Mafia, or he was part of Shoreline Mafia, and you know, big part of LA, you know, underground and stuff. I mean, when he was a kid, he used to sleep on my couch when he was a kid, you know, and and be like,
he's probably like, man, fuck him. Why is he putting my business on blast right now, man?
I know. I told him I was coming on here. I told him I was coming on here.
If I was him, I know wherever you at, bros. I felt it for you, dog. Like, damn, he put my motherfucking business out there, bro. Okay, I did sleep on your couch for a month.
No, but what I'm gonna say is this: is that I bring him up because when you're talking about working with young artists, is that I saw him in his rise, and I saw the hustle and the dedication and the work. Like, I saw it firsthand, and I took it for granted. You know what I mean? Like, he came from humble beginnings. You shot
a video for him.
And when he would stay over and we would hang out or whatever, he would say, one day, we joke about doing a video for him. I was like, yeah, when you get a budget or whatever. And he got a
damn, no family discount.
Yeah.
Talk about getting a budget. He's like,
music business,
Dr.
baby.
Dre, bro. He said, I love you, but when you get that budget right, man. Well, what about you? No, this is my money. You know what I'm saying? This is my bread, bro. No, but you gotta get your own.
But he, so they hustled it. They got a great deal.
Yeah.
So I did a video. It was a video for the song Musty that I guess it was one of the bigger songs, and they had already done a video for it, but like in a true record label fashion, they wanted to take what was already working and try to redo it. And what I did, I don't think was really like in their style necessarily, but it was just an opportunity to break them into a mainstream look and, just kind of introduce them into that industry, the industry side of things, so it's cool. But anyways, for instance, he's someone that like, anything he would ever need or anything like that, I would definitely work with him or anyone he would ever co-sign, for sure.
And I listened to this clip from an interview with OHGEEZY.
To my little Instagram bio.
Even though it's ceased to exist.
No, that's my shit. I mean, I came up with the name.
Oh,
like,
right.
That's my baby. It's forever gonna be my baby. That's like my whole vision and everything.
Can you use it still? Like, you still like sell merch for Shoreline Mafia and stuff?
Yeah, I own the trademark too. I bought it way before I became a rapper.
You bought the Shoreline Mafia trademark way before?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Because I actually heard at one point that the trademark might have been part of what the dispute was between the members, that at a certain point you owning the trademark became an issue.
Nah, that's not what it was, but I own the trademark since way before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Damn.
I mean, from this we can infer that maybe James, even though liking OHGEEZY, probably wanted him the hell off his couch. And in these conversations they're talking about, maybe James could have encouraged OHGEEZY to file for these things to help him sustain a good income and secure a future for him, his daughter, and their grandson. But that is speculation. Regardless, after the OTX tour finished, the group would start publicly doing their own solo projects, with Rob Vicious doing a solo tour and OHGEEZY dropping his first official solo single, Heavy. Rob would follow up his tour announcement with the release of Traplantic, which had a certified banger bands on it. However, after this, as if just a faded memory from a lean-induced fever dream, Rob and Kato would almost completely vanish from the limelight, not being in any interviews or any further live shows, but we'll come back to that in a bit. In August 2018, the group dropped Party Pack, which contained the now certified gold song Wings. The group would finish up their tour, and just in November of that same year, they would announce their next tour, Off the X, kicking off in the beginning of 2019. But before that, in December, they would drop their OTXmas mixtape, which ended up being really good marketing for the group. They would end up doing 2 sold-out shows at the Shrine in the start of 2019, which is a really impressive feat actually. But for some reason after this show, OHGEEZY would go on a string of solo shows, and it would be the same time that he coincidentally started getting promoted for that year's XXL freshman class as a solo artist. And no, he did not make it, by the way, if you're wondering. Anyway, the group would continue their plans and go on yet another tour, the Paid in Full tour, during the end of 2019. But this is where things really start to get dark, especially for Fenix, because pretty much right after the tour ended, Fenix and fellow members would lose one of their longtime friends and fellow rap mates, Mac P. Dawg. As Fenix was the closest with him, we can see how devastating this was for him. At this point, the group would rarely ever be together as one, leading to their last project, Mafia Business, being recorded by all artists separately, being mixed by an engineer. And that whole ordeal also gave us this masterpiece of a music video.
From the lean house straight to the strip club. Gotta get a pint, I'm tryna sip up.
Things would go pretty quiet from here, as there wouldn't be any new music or updates from any of the members for a couple of months. Maybe it was the pandemic, maybe they were cooking something up. But the next piece of Shoreline news would absolutely break the fans. In April of 2020, Phoenix Flexin would announce his departure from the group. A couple months later in July, he would go on the No Jumper podcast with Adam22, yet again, talking about the situation. Adam quickly asks him what happened and why about a year or so earlier the other two already dipped. Phoenix goes on to say that they had a fallout while on that first tour, and just left things after that. As when it came to him, he says he feels he was being left out on stuff in different projects. He also talks about how the label affected the group's impact on the rap scene in general, thinking it was underwhelming.
We want to know the real fucking story.
Yeah, come on, I can give y'all a little bit.
How did shit? Okay, yeah. How did things start to fall apart in terms of the actual group dynamic? Because we could take it back even to the early days that it was like 4, and then all of a sudden when you guys started touring, it was just 2 of you, and then there's like another layer of you guys kind of not talking to each other. Let's
for sure. So basically, it's like I mean, all that is kind of included into what it is. I ain't gonna go through everything. I'll give you like a brief little summary. You know what I mean? Like shit, I mean, I feel like it all just goes as far as include, like, you know what I'm saying, niggas just wasn't, me personally, like, I'd have been there from the start, you know what I'm saying, I done came up with the name Shoreline, with the woo, with bro. So we was the ones pushing that shit, you know what I'm saying, I always put the group first, you know what I'm saying, so if not everybody, it's so easy for a group to fall apart, like if not everybody on the same page and got the same vision and working towards the same thing, it's gonna crumble, like, you know what I'm saying, so.
When you started touring, did it just quickly become the 2 of you instead of the full 4?
We had a fallout on tour, a little fallout. You know what I'm saying? Niggas got to arguing and shit.
Okay. And so it was just not really working in terms of the group
you could
dynamic?
say that. I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, you know what I'm saying? As you can see, proof is in the pudding. Shit, like, it wasn't working. So, you know what I'm saying? Me, but like, we was still it was still a group though. Like, you know what I'm saying? Just because niggas couldn't, at that time, niggas couldn't be around or whatever, like, we was still a group though. We was just getting it. You know what I mean? Everybody kind of all right. So I thought everybody was just like, fuck it, we just gonna push for the group individually or however. You know what I'm saying?
So how much of it had to do with the labels and shit? Because it felt like to me like the label, like as soon as you guys got with the label, it's like there was a time period in which a Shoreline project could have dropped and it would have been a huge iconic
and it should have been, bro. That's what I be tripping out on. Like, I don't get why it went the way it did. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that this album ain't gonna be. I feel like this album's so hard, it could still possibly be #1 and go just as crazy as it would have at another time. But definitely, I feel like the label had some play in it.
Although here, it seems like he still probably has some unsettled resentment towards the group, but he does keep his head up and wants to press forward and immediately works on solo music. Master K would go on IG Live around February 2021 and talked a little bit about the situation himself.
I don't know, it was young niggas, we was really just good friends at the end of the day. Everybody, it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't niggas like, I mean, yeah, some of us had known each other for a good amount of time. Like, you know, we all did know each other for a good amount of time, but it was no love. At the end, towards the end, there wasn't no love in the group. Like, niggas wasn't acting like brothers like niggas said they were, so.
Rob would also take the IG Live around the same time and absolutely go off on people for constantly bringing up Shoreline and OHGEEZY. I mean, for real, just listen to this.
Fuck OHGEEZY, nigga. Unfollow me, nigga. If you, I do not want to see that shit. I do not care, nigga. I really don't care about none of that rapper shit, bro. I don't fucking care, bro. Fuck Shoreline Mafia, nigga. Fuck OHGEEZY, nigga. Stop talking about that shit on my fucking shit, bro.
From my best guess, it would appear that Rob Vicious probably was never too serious about the music. And what was OHGEEZY doing after the breakup? Well, he was doing everything he could to hype up the release of his first solo project, GEEZYWORLD. He would go on the Bootleg Kev podcast in August 2021 to talk about the album and all the features on it, as well as all the other stuff he had going on in his life, which was fully leashing out his own merch line, having a partnership with a restaurant, and co-founding a line of eyelashes with his girlfriend, and moving into a Palm Hills mansion. And on top of all of that, he claims to have been clean from lean for at least a year at this point, stating that at the start of the pandemic, he decided to get clean and focus on his mind and body. And as we can see from the other guys' interviews, they were still kind of getting high. He does go on a little bit into the breakup though, citing what Fenix has said earlier, that the first tour together really messed things up. The thing though is he blames it on living together, when in the Fenix interview with No Jumper, they literally talk about how they were living together before they blew up. It's also a little weird that OHGEEZY chose not to go on the No Jumper podcast, even though he chose that to be the first official interview for Shoreline Mafia out of admiration for Adam 22. He also says that it wasn't anyone's fault, but that the whole group wanted to do their own thing, which does kind of line up with what the others have been saying, but it's still strange as to why they came to that conclusion in the first place.
How hard was it for you to kind of pivot away from the group, or was it kind of always in the plans? Because anybody who's like a fan of what you guys are doing, you know, you were. I mean, shout out to everybody in the group, but I think it was obvious that like eventually you had to go solo, or at least
I feel like it was never in the plan. It's just like, you know, people grow, like, and just being on tour, being on the road, just figuring out life. Like, I'm getting older. I had my kid. When I had my kid, I was like, you know what, this like maybe it's time for me to go do my own thing. So, but everybody felt like that. Everybody was like, yeah, we want to do our own thing.
Yeah,
you got to think it's 4 different opinions, 4 different energies, 4 personalities. That's a lot going on.
And all 4 of y'all got to be on the same page when you go touch that stage, or you guys go do an interview.
You got to travel. Like, traveling and touring is like, even though it looked fun, that's just hard. It's super hard work. So just to keep that momentum and that energy up take a lot of work. So if you're not all the way invested,
I was gonna say, when you guys were all on tour together, was that like because I feel like when you tour with someone, you're kind of living with them, right?
Exactly.
So when that happens,
you living with people, you get to see like,
shit, this might not work.
Exactly. That's how all y'all at home, all y'all broke motherfuckers be fighting with y'all mama.
From here, Rob and Kato are totally out of Shoreline. Neither of them got a re-up deal with Atlantic, and both went on to live their own lives. They do still drop music, with Rob dropping stuff pretty often, and Kato dropping stuff more at his own speed. And the stuff is actually pretty good, and I encourage you guys to check it out. But from here, they aren't really part of the Shoreline story anymore. Fenix would also drop the first of his Fenix Flexing volumes in 2021, and start selling out his own shows. OHGEEZY would continue his business ventures and go on a world tour for his album, GEEZYWORLD, with him dropping the deluxe version of it that next year in 2022. Fenix would drop his Fenix Flexing Volumes 2 in 2022, and to the fans, it really had officially felt like Shoreline was officially dead. With no word from any member in almost a year now, and OHGEEZY and Fenix Flexing are getting so popular they're playing their own sold-out shows all across the world. But then, something happened in 2023. OHGEEZY would be performing a show at the Hollywood Palladium, when he would start to talk about how important the area is to him and how much the people helped Shoreline blow up. Then we hear Musty start playing, and finally, we get this. This absolutely rocked fans' minds, and even just the hip-hop world in general. It seemed like everyone was talking about the Shoreline reunion. The now duo would quickly follow up on their virality by dropping a song and music video to Heat Stick, which is sitting on 8.4 million views currently.
And the bitch up in a headlock, dead stock kicks, and the bitch gon' make the bed rock.
The song is notably different from previous Shoreline projects. While it does have a familiar sounding beat, it's definitely not produced by Ron. Right off, we can notice the different style in Fenix's flow, and we can hear the clarity in both of their voices, probably because they're not on lean anymore. I also can't help but notice how much Fenix kinda looks like Hobson with the contacts in right here. Then the pair dropped one more song called Work, which again has a much more professional, polished sound than classic Shoreline. But OHGEEZY notably goes back to his old cadence in the song, heavily referencing drugs again. Work came out in June and is sitting on 2 million YouTube views right now. That is the last official update we have. There really haven't been any announcements as to what's to come next, except for Fenix hopping on the I Told You So podcast to talk about how he and OHGEEZY had ended up being managed by the same group separately. Yeah, kinda odd, huh? But then he goes into how he and Jeezy are recording a lot of songs, and he talks about how he's even cool with Rob and Kato still.
Hell yeah. Come on. So, all right, talk to me about this. You have the album out right now. Out of the blue, Hollywood Palladium show too.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, you gotta do it in Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out my boy OHGEEZY. He brought me out for the show. You know what I mean?
So
that was kind of like right when we started. Like we was like, you know, just messages going back and forth.
Okay, so people want to know who hit who first.
Shit, I can't even remember. Let me check mine. I can't even remember.
Was it a situation where both of y'all were like past whatever was going on?
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, it had been like, let me see. Oh, you know the way we had the management. So management, that's what it is. We got the same management right now. I'm blessed to be behind the team. You know what I mean? Shout out Rory, shout out Paulo, shout out Eric, shout out all the folks I'm working with. You know what I mean? Got a solid ass team right now. You know what I mean? And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie, damn near every song that we've made is a hit.
Yeah.
Y'all gonna see. You know what I'm saying? Y'all have to wait and see.
And that is the entire story of Shoreline Mafia. I guess we just have to wait and hope that everything keeps going well for everyone. Looking back, we get to see a somewhat classic story of any musical group who starts small, makes it big, and has to deal with it together. They did so much for hip-hop and Gen Z when they were at their prime. The group played a significant role in revitalizing the West Coast sound, blending traditional elements with modern influences. Their success encouraged a resurgence of interest in West Coast hip-hop, paving the way for other artists in the region to gain recognition. Their lyrics often reflected the experiences and struggles of youth in urban environments. Candid approach to topics like drug use, street life, and personal growth resonated with a young audience, making them relatable figures in the hip-hop community. Their music videos and social media presence showcase a distinct visual aesthetic that combines street culture with high-energy visuals. And, just like anything else, all that is to live in the little period of history in which it happened. Just like every other video, I hope you enjoyed this one. Drop a like and subscribe before you leave, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Whether it's thoughts on this video, or an idea for another video, I mean, I'm down for whatever. I love talking with you guys. Check out the Look Back playlist, wherever it is, for more videos centered around all types of nostalgia. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.